I'd like to shift gears for a moment now and talk about my company and why we are so involved and embroiled in this big argument that's going on inside the computer landscape. So, history of Unix, this thing was started. So, if you think about computer operating systems, there are two major types around the world. You have Windows, Bill Gates, gazillions of dollars, they got all of that whole thing. Okay, that's desktop-centric and then works back towards the back-end server. Unix is the other big type of operating system, and Unix is not so much geared towards a desktop or a consumer environment. It's really geared to run businesses. And so when you look behind businesses and you look at the servers and the IT infrastructure that runs a business, primarily it's geared around Unix. So this is the operating system that started at AT&T. It was passed on to Novell and eventually acquired by SCO. And this is what is at the center, the intellectual property rights and the contract rights around this operating system that were started at AT&T and passed on to SCO is what we're talking about. We paid $100+ million along the way to get the rights to this, and that's really at the center of attention of the battle. There are a lot of people out there making a lot of opinions as to SCO's ownership around Unix. Again, when you go look at the winding road, that's one question. The other question is when you get there, you read through these contracts, what do we have? Okay? What I'd like to do for you right now is to lay out, just in real simple terms, rather than going through all the details of all the contracts we have here, the basics of what is netted out of all of those contracts. So the first thing is there's this thing called Unix System 5, which is basically the commercialized version of Unix that AT&T passed along, and that is we own the source code. So when you think about code, you think about object code or binary code and source code. Source code is the one that you program with. That's the valuable underlying crown jewels. You go to the next point here, SCO owns the agreements to all of the Unix vendors. So whereas Bill Gates and Microsoft is very monolithic. They own Windows, they own the code, it's theirs lock, stock, and barrel. They've driven it singularly as one company. The way Unix played out was you had Unix that was then partnered and licensed out thousands of times. The source code to Unix was licensed over thousands of times by AT&T. So how common is it to license source code this broadly? The answer is not very. We're going to come back to that point in just a moment. The third thing that SCO owns is the Unix System 5 copyrights. We, as part of this agreement, if you go to the original asset purchase agreement, what you'll see is 8 pages of copyrights that came to SCO. There was an amendment to that original purchase agreement that came on a year later that basically reinforced that we did own those copyrights. And now you're going to hear, if you come to this room here in 2 weeks, from a company that has stepped up and claimed ownership to those copyrights. So we bought the property from Novell, and now within the last 6 months, Novell has gone out publicly and said, wait a minute, we didn't sell you the copyrights. Okay, so we disagree violently over that point. Violently to the point that we filed a lawsuit 2 weeks ago against Novell to reinforce our ownership claim to them. Now, why did we file a lawsuit against Novell? We went to the Copyright Office and registered our copyrights. Is anybody here a copyright holder? Anybody gone through this process? Well, tell us what the process is. What do you do?
You just have to basically, well, first of all, everything you own is everything you produce is automatically copyrighted, as I understand current law. So it's just specifically speaking to the
yeah, if you could speak in the microphone, that would be great.
So if you're specifically speaking to the registration process, you just provide them essentially with the copy of the work, and you fill out some forms. And I believe we had to pay a small fee when we did this.
Okay.
It's simple.
What was it, a book or software code, or what was it?
It was, yeah, essentially software.
Okay, so you developed some software, you registered it, you sent it into the Copyright Office, paid a small fee, and then what did the Copyright Office do?
Well, essentially, the net result of that, as I understand it, and I'm not a lawyer, is that we receive basically essentially additional legal protections from someone who infringes on that copyright.
Did you get your certificate back from the copyright office?
Yeah, exactly.
Was it kind of cool when you got it?
Well, my partner has all handled most of this, but yeah, I guess he talked about it a lot.
So it's cool. You get it, and it's like, wow, I've got a copyrighted work now. It's a piece of paper.
It wasn't as cool as knowing that there were certain legal protections that came along with that.
That's the key part. So I've got a piece of paper. I have certain legal protections. And the Copyright Office granted this to me, okay? We went through this same process as you and your partner did last July. In fact, one of my partners here, Chris Sontag, who will join us on the Q&A, who runs our source licensing division, was responsible for that. And when the registrations came back, it was like, cool, right? You remember when we got those back? So a few weeks ago, I guess it was in December, we got word that Novell had gone into the Copyright Office after we did and had filed for copyright registrations on the same works that we had already filed for and had received registrations on. Okay? And guess what the Copyright Office did? Granted them a copyright. So exactly. It's a registration, okay? The net of this story is the Copyright Office does not, unlike patents, vet out the validity of the claim, okay? What was your name, ma'am? So Diane, if you went into the Copyright Office tomorrow and filed for Unix copyrights, the same ones that us and Novell now have a piece of paper, what would happen?
I'd get it.
You'd get it.
Plus, I don't even have to show them the whole thing.
You don't have to show them the whole thing. So now we'd have 3 copyright holders, okay? We filed a lawsuit against Novell. So then we went back to the Copyright Office and said, whoa, time out. Who's the referee over there? Somebody's got to step in and fix this. We feel very strongly about this point. We have a piece of paper, a contract, that they transfer these over to us, okay? And so what do you suppose they said?
Go to court.
Go to court. That's why we went to court 2 weeks ago. We sued them for slander of title. And we're going to be working through that process here. And the court system is set up to referee that situation. So that's what's going on. I'm getting a lot of legal education along the way here. Not as much as obviously you're getting here, but on some specific issues, it's pretty interesting to learn this stuff along the way. The next thing SCO has ownership rights on are the claims for violation of all Unix licenses. So we have these 6,000 contracts out there, and in our contract that we got from Novell, it says that if anybody violates their contract as it relates to Unix source code, any claims for damages are due to SCO. And then finally it says that if you create a derivative work on this source code, again, the control of that is owned by SCO. If you go back and look at what AT&T did when they created this licensing program, they had a notion of getting Unix far and broad. They wanted it to go around the world. Let's really spread Unix. Let's make it become a worldwide phenomenon. But at the same time, let's control it. I mean, these two objectives are working against each other. When you take source code and spread it far and wide, how do you keep control of it? How do you keep control of the derivative works? The way they did it was with very strongly worded confidentiality clauses that were in the contracts. So if you look at the actual contracts, which we won't go through right now, but we have copies of them here, you'll see that these are strongly worded devices that are designed to keep this harnessed in over the years. If you look at the contracts that SCO has, you see that we have the ownership rights around the core Unix IP that runs down the trunk of this. So in other words, System 5. And then you see all these different companies that have created derivatives. They've gone off and taken our System 5 code and created a derivative work. Now, the reason that we are in litigation with IBM, they are one of these licensees. And what we claim is that they have taken important key parts around one of these derivatives. Their version, they have 2 versions, AIX, which is the one they've natively held, and then Sequent Dynix, which is one they acquired in the late 90s. That key portions of this code that was protected under our rights has been taken by IBM and donated into this Linux environment.